All right, give me 1 sec. Hi, everyone. Give us 1 sec. We are just also going to go live on LinkedIn. So I just have to do one little tweak. Hi, Becky. How are you? Hey, Marshall. Hey, Kelsey. And I'm going to also edit this so that everyone who is an attendee can chat with us. And we have a brilliant person here with us today. Webinar is going to start in just a minute, but I'm getting you geared up. We have a brilliant previous CISO, like super experienced security genius here today, Anthony Johnson. This is not the official intro, but just get excited. And I want to make sure you guys can comment and do Q&A. So hold on 1 second. Live streaming, go live. Cool. This is being live streamed on the Cybersecurity Marketing Society LinkedIn page, theoretically. All right. Hey, everyone. Hi. It's so good to see everyone. We're so excited to have another awesome webinar live stream thing with the Cybersecurity Marketing Society. I'm going to go over quickly housekeeping, some background info if this is popping up in your LinkedIn, or if you signed up for this webinar and you have no idea what it's about. Hi, my name is Gianna Whitford. I'm one of the co-founders of the Cybersecurity Marketing Society. It is the best place in the world to be a marketer in cyber. Please join our private community, which is marketers only, no sales, no founders, no CEOs. And we have an awesome forum of over 2,500 marketers at cybersecurity products and services companies. And we want you to join us, network with your peers at over 800 companies around the globe, and learn things, make better marketing, progress your careers, make some friends, some wacky online friends, and then, of course, culminate in coming to Austin, Texas in December for Cyber Marketing Con, which is a conference all about marketing and cyber, which is not a conference that you usually experience. So today, enough of that, right? Quick housekeeping. If you have a comment, a question, if you have a story you want to tell, sorry, this is not your webinar, but if you have a comment, a question, if you want to come up on screen and ask Anthony something, raise your hand, post in the chat. I will be watching the Q&A all throughout the webinar, and Anthony will be taking questions during this. And then lastly, I want to say, hey, if you are interested in, because Anthony's a founder, so he does have a very cool product as well as sharing his information and his knowledge with us. He's also the founder of Delve Risk, which is a very cool like intelligence platform that he'll tell you about. If you're interested in working with Delve Risk, society members get a very cool discount. Very cool discount. So Anthony, we're so excited to have you here to talk about the CISO journey and the CISO, which is typically the top of the security pyramid, the security org, about how they're moving and changing organizations and the research you have done on this topic. So I'm going to shut up now.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Gianna. I put together just a couple of slides. I'm not a big slide fan, but I put together just a few just to kind of frame the conversation. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump around and share a bunch of data points. So a lot of information that I think you'll find interesting and useful. And if there's questions or you want to chat about anything, please just feel free to interrupt me. So with that, let me jump into this official slide deck, and we'll go here. And I'll leave it like that just because it's easier just to kind of streamline it. Hopefully everyone can see that. Hopefully that looks good.
Looks good. It does show the whole PowerPoint if you want to try screen share mode.
No, this will be fine.
Yeah, we'll live.
So I like to start off with giving some context about who the heck I am. I've been in cyber for about 25 years now. And I was formerly the CISO at GE Treasury, Fannie Mae, the corporate investment bank at JP Morgan. I was a deputy over at Capital One. I am a networking relationship junkie. I've got about 1,200 CISOs on my cell phone, and there's probably not many that I can't get to or don't know. I decided to take this experience and my experience as a buyer 4 years ago. And 4 years ago, I founded Delve Risk, right? The premise of Delve Risk and what we do is we study the largest enterprises in the world, all the way down to their cybersecurity teams, their CISOs, et cetera. And we help sales and marketing teams better understand their buyers. So really, we provide all the research and context. But before I kind of get into some of the details of what we're going to be talking, which is CISOs moving around, the overall aspects of mobility in cybersecurity teams, and what that actually means for you, let's frame the conversation just a little bit. I love the idea of painting a bridge. It's really, really fascinating. I use this analogy for how you drive enterprise change, but it also makes sense for how you manage or think about sales to an enterprise. So let's talk about what a bridge. I'm actually talking about a physical bridge. So an actual structure that spans, one location to the other. And most people don't realize like everything that goes into painting a bridge. I was working with an owner of a company. This is probably like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and his whole company's job, all they did was paint. I think they painted the Brooklyn Bridge. It was a big bridge in New York. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize you actually had to paint it more than once. And he's like, oh, it's painted all the time. And as I learned more, I really realized that when they paint a bridge, it's painted continuously. So they start on one side and then they start painting. And then as they're thinking about it halfway through, weather, wind, accidents, scratches happen on the first part of the bridge. So the moment they're done with the full bridge, they actually have to go back and repaint and retouch up everything that was damaged by erosion and wind and everything. And it's a protective paint that they put on, but it makes sure that it's consistent. But painting a bridge is a forever task. So if you ever start a business and you always want work, just get a bridge that you can just paint constantly. And you always have an ongoing contract from that perspective. So why does that matter to marketing and sales teams? In the aspect of cybersecurity, driving organizational change, driving enterprise change, and more importantly, selling to those people that are driving and managing that change, you have to recognize that there's constant tweaks that are going on. You may win a champion in the very beginning of the bridge when you're painting it, and 4 months later, they've moved on. And now you have to actually go back and restart that champion journey. You might build 5 champions and you're going along, they get promoted, they take on different roles. So it is an ongoing task of managing who you're building the relationships with, and even knowing who is at the company in the right sense here, right? I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to jump into just point some data elements out within the portal. And so please stop me along the way. But cyber mobility is really, really interesting. Generally, over the past 12 months, we've seen a meaningful reduction in the number of open roles. So at Delve Risk, we study the 1,600 largest enterprises out there. And what we're really looking at is everything about the company, everything on their social media, earnings statements, all the cyber jobs they're hiring for, et cetera. But we've consistently seen a reduction in the number of mid-level roles, particularly that they're hiring for. And attrition remains at a pretty significant level. Cyber attrition seems to be about 20-some% for most of these organizations. So you have a 20% attrition rate that's moving along, but that attrition rate isn't necessarily the same for the most senior roles, right? And I'll get into some of those numbers here pretty shortly. Work from home is a really, really strong requirement for folks. And that actually translates to some really, really interesting data points about how many people live in the same city as the headquarters of their organization. So a lot of times when marketing folk are thinking about, how you would handle a field event marketing, who you would invite to a dinner, it's a really interesting challenge to look at and say, okay, we're going to go do something in Chicago. Well, who do we invite? Knowing that so many of the leaders no longer live in Chicago, it's important to know where they actually live. It'll just saves you a lot of time. And there's been a slight slowdown in the reduction of CISOs crossing industries. CISOs have generally started to remain in industries. And this kind of goes into this number that I want to talk about, which is historically, we've seen, and people talk about CISOs changing roles every 18 to 24 months. But when we look at the data, it's not that at all. The average tenure for a CISO at these largest organizations is actually about 4.5 years. And it increases when we include the average tenure across their overall leadership teams, right? We start getting into some really significant numbers. And there's some really important things to look at, which means, for example, if you're coaching, training, educating about your product, good, or service, you actually have a longer timeline instead of trying to hit them in just the 18-month cycle, right? You actually have a longer timeline to educate them. But then when they do move, you actually know that they're going to be there longer as well. So that's a really important piece to think about how you're marketing to them, and particularly the makeup of them. And then we specifically looked at the top cities of where security leaders are. And we looked across the about nearly 4,000 people that we study. And you won't be surprised, New York, Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Dallas, Fort Worth. What you might be surprised is that out of the nearly 4,000 people, they're spread out across almost 900 cities, 900 locations. So let me stop the share. I'm going to pull up the portal. I see there's a comment. The headquarters of companies in Chicago, but the security team's all remote. Absolutely. And let me share a little bit about what we're doing and how we get this data so you guys can see this. This is the Dell Risk Portal. And what we're doing here, and I'm going to just jump around to provide some more context on some numbers here as well as we're kind of going through this. I had my team do a poll this morning so we can look at real-time data of what we're seeing. Now, we're using open source research, scraping, pulling everything from social media, earnings statements, 10K, you name it, slide share pieces, presentations, and we've pulled all this data to make life easier for folks. So here we can segment the world. We can say, I only want to see companies in a specific sector, but specifically for this group, let's talk about hometown. So here you can see we have 1,600 companies. Let's look at just Chicago. These are the companies where somebody in their executive leadership team lives in Chicago. And specifically, there are 89 executives or cyber decision makers that live in Chicago. You see, we have companies that are in Zurich. The headquarters are in California or Texas. There are a good number that are here based in headquartered in Chicago. But as you start to figure out, where you're targeting, Chicago's great, New York's great, Atlanta, Dallas, like I mentioned. But the ones I wanted to emphasize for folks are actually ones that are not the top 5. These are typically cities that are not being targeted for events where you can actually get some immediate value of saying, hey, we're going to do a field event, we're going to host a dinner. Other cities to consider are going to be Houston, Charlotte, Columbus, Phoenix, Philly, Cincinnati, and Seattle.
Anthony, Columbus, Ohio?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I know I popped on the screen just
No
to
worries,
say
great.
Columbus, Ohio. I'm
Yes.
like into Columbus, Ohio. Keep going.
Absolutely, right. And it's really weird because you're like, okay, you might be planning a field event and not thinking about Columbus, Ohio, or not thinking about, hey, we're going to do something in Pittsburgh specifically. But there's a pretty good concentration of where to go to. Cities that you probably want to avoid, because we're looking, across this globally here, are going to be like Medford, Allentown, Wake Forest. These are cities where there's only a couple executives that actually live there. And what's really cool about the way we do this in the platform is we can just export all of this data. Now, there's some interesting questions we've gotten in the past from customers, or, intersecting hobbies or sports teams related to a city or state. Those are definitely additional ways to slice it. But if you wanted to have a pretty wide aperture, you could do this, just within a city, and then perhaps say a specific sector. So let me do New York again. Let me do New York here.
Anthony, can the
Yes.
audience suggest some cities for us to look
Yeah,
at?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If y'all have some ideas, throw them in the chat and we can look it up live, which is fun. Ooh, we have one already. Hi, Kelsey.
Yeah,
After you do your thing, Anthony, the next request is Denver.
let's just look at Denver. So here, this is great, right? So we've got 27 companies that are represented within Denver. And then from our data pool, I'll tell you the actual number of folk in Denver. Give me 1 second. So there's 31 executives across these companies that live in Denver here, right? Now, if you were just to do this classically, you would probably only try to target, these 11 companies, right? But instead, the rest of your West Coast team, East Coast team, Tola area, right? Knowing that, hey, we should look at Acuity, we should look at American Tile or Tire, Sienna. All of this type of information is really important to figure out who the heck to invite. Because when you get into this, what you'll actually be able to see as well. Yeah, absolutely. You'll actually be able to see all of the cybersecurity decision makers for that company as well. So being able to just save yourself the time, so you know who to market to, who to target, and where they're going to or from. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Folks, put any questions in the chat. Anthony has the thing up live and we can explore it. So Lisa, who's on the LinkedIn Live, hi Lisa. How about McLean, Virginia? And that Nova area, I think, is a very interesting area. Although I don't know if McLean is Nova, is North Virginia.
Yeah, it would be technically Nova.
Yeah, it's an interesting area because so many people live there. It's you think it must be a good area, but go ahead.
95, yeah. So when we look at McLean, when we look at Tyson's, let's see, Washington DC area, we start getting into a whole bunch. So we can slice and dice this all the way down. But we actually would say that there are, I'm just looking at the data set here, 95 executives across these largest enterprises that if you were to do an event, you would want to invite them to your event to target specifically here, right? And of course, you could say you only want to see, super techie people who live in
Anthony, can you I think it's a very small screen for folks. So you are filtering by archetype. What is that?
I am. So filtering by archetype. So what this really is a category based on their background. So are they techie? Or are they a developer, governance and risk, or auditor? We can filter by diffusion of innovation. So are they an innovator or are they a lagger? Where do they fit on the whole crossing the chasm spectrum? And so this is a really interesting piece. So I can say, I only want to see developers or technologists in the Washington, DC area, right? And now I've shrunk the world, narrowed my ICP down even further. Right. Maybe I want to only see them in particular industries. So I can pick the industry pieces here, right? And so there's lots of ways that we could slice and dice this down. And then we get into the full meat of the report. And again, I can look specifically, who are the key decision makers? How many open roles do they have? What should I be thinking about that? All right. And this is a full dossier piece here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the city poll, what that looks like, because that is a big pain point that we consistently hear from a number of our customers that are marketing. The other thing that's important to note here, and I'm going to show this a bit. This is a calendar where we track every cybersecurity conference and event that's going on. We get the full details, speakers, sponsors, moderators, etc. But what's really interesting here that I wanted to show to this group is the sheer volume.
We know that volume, Anthony. We know that volume very well. I know that volume very well. When we were playing Cyber Marketing Con, it's what 3 days can we actually put our conference for marketers in cyber, because there are so many security events out there in the world. So yeah,
there's 29 today. It's the crazy.
I know. I'm at the Guide Point. I'm actually live. I'm gonna go live later. I'm at Guide Point Security Mid-Atlantic, and there's a million. I'm sure some of you are literally at an event right now too.
it's so wild, right? And so when we think about this, what we're finding is that's important for the context of mobility is that over the past year and over the past 2 years, a number of security leaders have been emphasizing local events for their team. because they didn't have to spend, they spent years without having to spend a lot of travel dollars. And so there's been a big uptick in local chapter events like ISSA, B-Sides, Cloud Security Alliance events. And that's an important piece as you think about the mobility for of where these people are attending events, where they're spending their time, and ultimately where you're spending money as well, right? One of the things I love to show is that you can search by a CISO, you can search by a company, but specifically you can look and say, you know, what are all the events? So here we can see Lauren Dana Rosenblatt, she's a CISO for IFF, all New York events, right? Like people are generally staying local where they're going to be speaking at. Go ahead, please.
Is that so? That's a list of everywhere that specific CISO is speaking, which is very
speaking
cool.
Or has spoken at, yeah.
This year. Okay, cool. And like the city
Yep.
and like the event. That's neat,
Yep.
because if you're like, you know, trying to target an account and it's like, oh, we know they're going to be speaking there. That's really neat, because you could potentially run into them there.
That's exactly it. The big thing I wanted to show here was the fact, though, that there's so many of these events, and there's been a big, a disproportionate amount of emphasis on remaining local, right? Local, so they're not traveling as much to the bigger events. Not to say the big events are bad, but as you're thinking about it from a marketing society, there's been a huge uptick in the local ISSA events. Those have probably gotten an outsized level of attention and support over the past couple of years. So definitely something to consider here.
So someone is asking, okay, local chapter events for practitioners, sure, but how about CISOs or security executives? So I think that question comes from the idea that like besides ISSA, ISC squared, AWASP are practitioner focused events, and that's heavily true, I think, in a lot of cases. So are there events, you just said ISSA, are there other local events that execs are
So
attending?
really great question, Tiziana. Good to see you. It's been a while. Local events have also drawn attention and time from the security leaders as speakers. So you're going to see more of those people being speakers to their local events. And some particular ones are like the North Texas ISSA, Southern California, Colorado Springs. Those are really big ones there. A number of folk have started to actually split the time between either a Black Hat or an RSA component. RSA and Black Hat this year were bonkers. If you attended, it definitely felt like a pre-COVID set of events, right? Lots of attention. I saw Gianna there. You know, they were definitely slammed, right?
It was nuts. It was just like, for anyone who's here who was at either Black Hat or RSA, I think it was like record breaking pre-COVID numbers, just 100%. What Anthony just said.
Yep. Now it is important to recognize that there's two conferences. So there's RSA, which is RSA proper, and then there's like all the sub meetings that happen around RSA, right? So it's and a lot of the security leaders, while they attend RSA, they actually attend all the sub conferences, meetings, you know, and they're just kind of slammed from that perspective there. Now, coming back to the topic of mobility piece here, right? There's something that I want to emphasize. When we look at the number of security leaders that are CISOs that are in role, and we look at their actual archetype, a good majority are non-technical, right? So a good majority of the actual executive leaders do not have the background of being a technologist or a developer. They come from an audit or governance and risk organization here, right? Now, what's fascinating about it is that this is for the senior most decision maker role, and this has continued to grow over the past couple of years, which kind of makes sense that they're hiring more people who can speak to the board more, some of the more senior executive conversations, and they don't need the tech geeks as much here. But an interesting data point that I like to highlight here, and this is actually something disappointing, but I like to call it out, is that out of the 1,600 companies, only 394 have a woman in the cyber decision maker, not even just the CISO role, but as a cyber decision maker, a CISO or a CISO -2. So if you're thinking about doing an event that really supports women leaders in cybersecurity, I highly encourage you to do that. It's something we need to continue to build up, but it's an important piece. A lot of times these female leaders don't have as much mobility. They're not moving as frequently as their male counterparts, right? And so if there's a new opportunity, you hear about a new CISO job, make sure you create that space so that they can take that shot. So it's not a direct mobility piece, but it's something I always have to call out because it drives me crazy that it's not closer to 50-50 here.
I'm gonna shout out Safe Breach, sorry, not Safe Breach, Safe Base, which is one of our members, for hosting and launching Women in Trust recently, which is a conference and an event focused on women leadership in security and trust related positions. So just a
Awesome.
shout out, Safe Base, if you're on.
That's awesome.
You can hear us.
It's super important, right? The mobility aspects, and particularly when we look at the number of open roles of where we're seeing both women and just the opportunities of folks who don't live there, live in a city specifically. It's pretty crazy. One thing I wanted to kind of highlight here is that when we think about, I'll just pick the Chicago example again. This is not actually industry specific either. So let's just blow away, I'm taking away the sectors, and I'm just going to slowly add some in here. Right, business services, and then we start to get to chunky financial services, right? And you can actually see that it's this middle section here where we start getting some big numbers here, like bigger numbers of where we're going.
Can you say that out loud, Anthony, for those who have humongous glasses? What are the sectors?
Yeah, so these are all the sectors here of what sectors the companies are in. So like we can look, there's only one, and this is just examples of people in Chicago. So let's say that you have a rep or a rep who's focused on insurance companies in Chicago, right? He's only got one where the executive team, someone from the exec team lives there. But you start to add other sectors, which really emphasizes that the location of where the executive team lives is really important, because otherwise you have people doing outreach, trying to build relationships, and they are literally on the other side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Long way of saying that market segmentation based off of just the geolocation may not make sense. We've got nearly 1,300 people, over 1,300 people on the platform, 70 some customers. And it's a regular question for people of like, is the way we're breaking up sales regions, does that make sense anymore? Now that we know executives and their leadership teams just kind of live everywhere and our sales reps kind of live everywhere. And I would encourage you to think about this from a perspective of who has the best relationships or the opportunity to create the best relationships with folks in those cities where they can meet them up for dinner or lunch, whatever that opportunistic piece is.
Anthony, you were a CISO. Did you do deal making over dinners and lunches
100%.
and events? Okay. Tell us about it.
So I wanted to spend, like I said, the first 30 minutes just kind of sharing some numbers, sharing some data, perhaps answering any questions if something pops up here. But the other piece that I want to be able to talk about is, as a decision maker, right? As a CISO, the relationship is infinitely important, right? It's way more important even than the technology, I think. And here's, as long as the tech does the thing it needs to do, as long as it works, then it becomes a matter of who do I trust to deliver it better, right? It's not who bought me the best bottle of scotch or who threw the craziest party that I don't remember.
So you're saying you're not bribable, is what I'm hearing.
That's exactly it, right?
Okay.
But it does come down to, who do I trust to deliver this solution? Who do I trust that something's going to go bump, that when it goes bump, they're going to be there for me? And it really, so it's not just about the volume game. It's about understanding your buyers and understanding what makes them tick, what their priorities are, and where you're going to be able to get the opportunities to engage with them. So that's really, Tiziana, thank you. Thanks so much. I just read that last comment. That's awesome. It's been a lot of fun here. The objective here is, I didn't want to spend just a ton of time just doing a bunch of data deep dives and just going super nutty on it. But I did want to highlight a few pieces. If you're looking up specific cities, I would emphasize those top 5 that I mentioned, right? If you want to go to where other people aren't fishing in the pond, probably go to the next top 5 or the maybe looking at the top 20 here. There's a good concentration in number of cities where there's a good 18, 30 cyber executives who live there that I think you can collectively build an event around, right? I'm going to recap just a couple of cities that I maybe didn't mention. Minneapolis, St. Paul is a good one. Nashville has been growing pretty significantly. Jacksonville, that's one you actually never hear anybody be like, oh, we're doing a conference in Jacksonville or an event in Jacksonville.
Dude, Jacksonville is like so much cooler than Orlando. No offense.
Orlando is good as well, but I agree.
I know. You're like, well, CISOs live in Orlando too. I know. I'm just saying.
So here's the funny thing. There's more security leaders that live in Jacksonville than Orlando.
Jacksonville's cool, you guys. Thank you. Tiziana says, yes, and there is a beach. Yes, Orlando has, okay, look, I lived in Florida for like almost a decade, so I can talk about Florida cities. She says someone who moved away. And like Orlando, sure, there's Disney. You go to an event there and you don't even go to Disney. I'm at the GuidePoint Security Conference talking to security folks today, like security engineers and CISOs and security folks, talking about places that they have been to conferences, coincidentally, Anthony. And people are like, yeah, we go to Orlando, and it's like, we don't even go to the Disney. It's like, we just stay on site. So
that's exactly it, right? Where is there's a city I've been talking a lot about lately. People sleep on Alabama, Birmingham, right?
Oh, like Birmingham, Huntsville. What do you think about Huntsville? Or is it like not really?
Yeah, let me look at the data piece here.
You guys, anyone can throw out a city now, by the way. And while you look that up, Anthony, April says, hearing a lot lately about traditional sales territories not making as much sense these days. Old ways don't always make sense when you're trying to implement ABM, and also Orlando sucks.
Yes. So not many in Huntsville. So that's actually surprising. I'll have to double check because I'm looking at across the full list there. So yeah, not many in Huntsville, but you're absolutely right. We actually have one customer that the way they do their sales territories, April, is they do it like a draft. And so somebody says, hey, I want this region. They're like, well, why do you get that company? Or I want this company. They're like, oh, I want that company because I have relationships here, blah. And it's no longer predicated on just where they live. Because it's historically been, oh, you're in New York, you get to the Northeast. Okay, they maybe moved from California and they have 15 years of relationships on the West Coast. Like, that would make a lot more sense. And so we're seeing people who are using our data for an ABM strategy being able to make those decisions, particularly when you can slice and dice and be like, well, I live in the same city as all these company executives. I have a more likely chance to actually network with them, interface, do a one-off lunch or dinner without having to travel than somebody who just lives on the other side of the country here, right? So once you have data, you can make these decisions in a really profound way. It's also why we update our data every single month. And then the only shameless plug I'll make is that, and we can fix your Salesforce. So we can feed the data to your Salesforce. So that's something there as well.
I'm going to give one shameless plug for you too, Anthony, because I really liked, obviously, before we talk to any partner at the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, we look at the product too. And I have spent many of hundreds of thousands of dollars buying things as a security leader, or as a marketing leader at a security company. So millions of dollars. So I took a look, and one thing I love that you do is you guys will just like, that your customers can just request things and you'll email them over too, which is like amazing. Honestly,
it's been fun is every time we get a new customer, and we just got 2 in the last 2 days, so really excited about that. So Cyber6 and Firemon just signed up as new customers for us. But they will actually send over a list of all the cities they're going to, and then we'll just give them a download of an export of all the executives who live there. And it just saves you time. Like, so at the end of the day, let's save you time, right? Time
saving is important. April has a question about the product, so we're gonna let you continue to talk about it, Anthony. This might not be something you want to address on here and on LinkedIn Live, whatever, but we're on this call. But I'm wondering how this data differs from what's available on Zoom Info. So how's your platform different?
Yeah, so I'll actually I'll give you a real example from this week. We had a customer that was syncing our data to their Salesforce. And because we track every single month who's moving, companies, etc. And they were like, well, you guys are disassociating all these contacts. We're moving people from company A to B. And they're like, we just updated with Zoom Info, our Salesforce record. And I'm like, oh, well, the reason why we're desyncing them is because those people changed jobs 2 years ago. About 40% of the data that they had just imported was not accurate.
That's crazy
It's
also.
nuts. And the reality here is this. While I think Zoom Info is a decent or good company, they're trying to do 40,000 companies and everything about them. We only care about cyber, and we only care about 2,000 companies. So we focus solely to go deep. We had another customer, a chief marketing officer, who signed up. He decided to do a data review in comparison April. He looked at 400 data points and found 2 errors in our data, which we felt really positive about. Now, my research team freaked out. They're like, what was wrong? And it was like, oh, like, so we jumped on it. But there were two errors out of that. So we feel really good. Again, we are singularly focused. We only care about that. And we're really passionate about it. And to Gianna's point, if somebody wants something, we build it. Our entire roadmap comes from sales and marketing folk.
Cool. Are you gonna like move into the mid-market or down the enterprise levels anytime soon, Anthony? Or I don't know. I assume that's a question you get asked.
Yeah, it's something we get asked a lot. Like right now, we are focused on the largest enterprises. It's something we'll possibly consider. We've thought about it, but for now, we want to have the most accurate, super detailed information. I think that giving people more better quality data is something we need. Like we as an industry need it, right? There are too many great cybersecurity products that fail to really take off, simply because the people selling it and the marketing teams, they don't actually understand the buyers enough, right? And the analogy I like to use is like, if you're selling a spoon and the only thing I eat is noodles, then like there's kind of a disconnect. If you come to me and you talk to me about how I can use a spoon to eat noodles and chop it up and do the thing, then maybe we can have a conversation, right? But you have to know that like I'm a chopstick guy, and that's all I've ever used is chopsticks, right? It is important to understand your buyer really, really deeply. And I think that we're starting to see people move away from just blanket marketing. So I don't want to drone on. There's I wanted to just spend about 30 minutes covering some data points. I obviously didn't do a product demo, but I kind of jumped around to show some use case pieces here. The one final tidbit I will say is that with the mobility, the amount of mobility that's going on right now, CISOs in general are having a hard time getting new jobs. Okay, It's fascinating. Out of the 1,600 companies that we're studying, 260 or so, let me double check the direct number here, do not have a CISO enroll. So this is the report. Oh, I'm sorry, 325 of the 1,600 companies don't have a CISO enroll today.
So this is, and what is this, Anthony? This is like a report you send to your customers every month,
Yeah, so
right?
this is a monthly report. You can actually just sign up for a community account for free, and you'll get a copy of this.
Nice.
But this is we track which security leaders are changing jobs, where they're going to and from, which ones don't have a CISO enroll. And so we do this every single month. But the reason why it's important that I wanted to call it out is that with this many security leaders not being able to find roles, so many vacancies, there are a lot of great security leaders that can be useful for your marketing efforts as a internal field CISO champion to help build and bridge. And a lot of them are open to that. So definitely consider that as a channel. And I would definitely say, there's a very small proportion of those that are actually led or run by women. So consider that factor as well, because there are a lot of great female security leaders who would love that opportunity. So I just wanted to call that out as the last data point.
So you're saying, there's some people who are either open to joining your team as a field CISO and or working as maybe an influencer or
exactly
a representative or as a contractor or something to sort of
definitely because they've had so much mobility. You have companies that are now trying to get their CISOs and leadership teams back into the office. They're like, I moved to Tulsa. I'm not going back to New York. Like, that's not going to happen. there's a lot of the mobility has created a lot of opportunity for folk to think about their where they can add value. And I think vendors could definitely reap that value there.
Yeah, I'll add for anyone who's a security influencer who's listening to this chat, a CISO or a BISO, or anyone who wants to sort of learn more about becoming an influencer, a thought leader, a talking head, or working with companies, please join Cyber Creator Con, which is a conference for influencers in security. It is completely free. It's going to be inside of Cyber Marketing Con. Cool, right? We're like doing a Russian dolls, like inside of things. And it's going to be live streamed. Tickets are at cybermarketingconference.com. It's in the drop down of special events. And then Tiziana has a good question. Okay, with what you were just saying, Anthony, about the people who are available, a lot of CISOs and execs who are available to be doing these, they don't have a full-time job right now. Is that because a lot of companies are outsourcing their security services, so they're not having an in-house team?
Yeah, so I don't know. I've spoken to a number of executive headhunters, and the sentiment right now is that there are a number of exec headhunters where they are doing a quarter of the placements that they've done in any other year, right? Which is really, really fascinating. And it seems like that a lot of these are large companies, right? These are almost all over $1 billion in revenue. And they're just not filling the CISO role. Some of them haven't filled a CISO in 6 to 9 months. And it seems like that they are just cost avoiding and pushing this out. And none of us can figure out actually why. A number of CFOs are gun shy. A lot of CISOs, I will say, are asking for numbers that don't make sense because they hear of other people in other industries that are getting paid $1 million. And they're like, oh, I should get $1 million soon. It's like, no, you're in retail. You're probably not going to get $1 million for that same role. So I think there's just a disconnect between the market. I anticipate this will right size, and we'll see some shifting of this in Q1, Q2 of next year.
Yeah, Anthony, on that topic of the inflated numbers, I think there was a little, during the pandemic, there was some salary explosion for a lot of industries, marketers too. Us at the Cybersecurity Marketing Society, we keep track of marketing salaries. We have a humongous database, living database of salaries, all self-submitted by our members as they change jobs, as they join the community. So it's available on our website, cybersecuritymarketingsociety.com. Open, anyone can access it, take a look, see what the latest salaries are for the similar roles, as well as equity and other things that are important to know about when you're evaluating an offer. But Anthony,
we should do that for CISOs.
You should do that for CISOs. You should.
Yeah,
do it.
Totally.
Nice. Okay. But what I wanted to ask was, okay, so you said, you just made you were having a fake conversation with someone. It was like, well, you're in retail, so the salaries are lower. What is there like, and you're only looking at enterprises, big enterprise, 2,000 companies in total. What is the highest paying CISO role? Like what industry?
$10 million.
What?
I've seen $10 million.
Wow. Where? Well, don't tell me. Maybe you can't say specifically. Is that finance? Is that the industry?
Oh, yes, it is.
Of course it is.
Yeah, $10 million, and that was a role that was filled last year.
Yeah. Well, okay, that makes sense to me. Like if you're looking at like a very big top,
and it's fascinating, right? There are some crazy numbers. I've seen people had a conversation with somebody just a few months ago. They have 8 people on their team and they make $800,000 a year. And I'm like, and they felt underpaid, which was fascinating to me. And I'm like, you have 8 people on your team. Your company is like 600 people. You make $800,000. And so like the expectation from some of these leaders, like, well, I should be getting, double that. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't. Like you should be happy, right? So hearing this type of stuff has prompted people to change roles and then have these really outsized expectations. We have a couple of CISO roles that we're helping to fill. I'm not a recruiter, but I just know a lot of folks, so we connect people. And like it's a surprise to hear some of these numbers security leaders are asking, and they don't have a job right now. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not going to happen, dude.
It's tough. People, it's golden handcuffs, but it's a problem when the market has gone up. You're up here, and then the market has dipped, right? Because now you bought a big house in Orlando and Jacksonville.
Yep.
And then like, it's hey everyone, always just like you spend within your means. Otherwise you get
It's
stuck in that track where you must make that amount. Then if you can't, you're screwed.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. Again, I think that we'll start to see some normalization in Q1, Q2 of next year of CISOs being placed. I think the SEC guidance coming out or the enforcement date in December is gonna add that. I actually anticipate you'll see CIOs listed on the 10K though, not CISOs. So I think there's going to be some industry shifting here. But really, again, coming back to this, I appreciate the chance just to chat with the group, talk about some of the mobility pieces. I would say the big takeaways, if you're thinking about something, just realize people don't live where their companies are headquartered. And if you're looking at, again, don't think about New York, Atlanta, DC, Chicago. Those are good, but look for other cities. And if you have questions, you're like, hey, what are some top cities I should look at? Because I want to do a field event. Just email myself or Nick. We'll get you some answers. We'll be happy to walk you through what we actually do, how customers on marketing and sales use us. But the most important thing is we're happy to share our data, make it so that you don't spend hours building a list out when we could just download it and send it to you. So that's everything I wanted to cover today.
Cool. Are you trying to get away from this? Are you trying to get off the live, Anthony? Because I'm going to start asking you more about CISO salaries.
No. I just whenever I'm doing a talk and people, we kind of come. I want to let people know. I'm like, hey, if there's more questions, I'm happy to.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like I'm always
Okay.
giving you time back there.
I know. I'm just teasing. I like to tease on these things. We have a question from the audience. Any ideas on performance of live events versus online webinars? Okay, so I think that'll be very I don't know, Anthony, if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah. So the live events have come back in, and I would say a pretty rigorous way. And that has seemed to become a big preference for people. The online webinars, and I think that from an ROI perspective as a marketing head, right? Like you're not able to get the engagement. And if you're actually trying to build a champion, somebody who's going to advocate for you, while a webinar is good, the live event is better. The handshake just kind of seals the deal. But the important thing is this: you don't need to spend $50,000 to do the live event. You could sponsor a localized essay, be the keynote, and talk with the CISO for $1,500 to $2,000, right? And you're going to get a much bigger ROI. The example I use all the time is North Texas ISSA. There's about 600 CISOs who really love their Dallas Plano ISSA chapter there, right? You're seeing the same thing in Southern California and LA. So San Diego and then the LA chapter. Cloud Security Alliance has a lot of good stickiness. And so I would say live events tend to be up there. The webinars I think are good for general awareness, but they're also so much harder to follow up, right?
Yeah, you become part of the noise. I mean, there's, as a marketer, right? Because I'm like, we're doing a mix of channels. We're doing multiple touch points across many things. Of course, webinars are typically actually important. Like, I don't know anyone who doesn't do webinars. Maybe we're all doing the wrong thing, but that's a joke. Webinars, I think, sometimes it's harder to track the engagement and track the willingness for someone to talk to you there, right? At an event, you look someone in the eye, you shake your hand, the salespeople put on the charm, but on a webinar, it's all through a screen and hard to follow up. We saw this during COVID
too. I mean, so many webinars, at the beginning, people would do the cameras on, and then eventually it was just like cameras off. We're doing a wine tasting. Nobody's on camera. Nobody gets, and you have somebody sommelier talking about stuff. And you're like, are they there? Like, I don't know if they're there. Nobody's talking.
I'd be kicking those people out. I'd be like, I paid a lot of money for the sommelier. You got to put your camera on. That's like the one requirement here. And that, I think what the answer is though, Anthony, from my perspective, is that it depends.
Yeah.
It always depends, right?
Yep, I totally agree. Now, I think the other one thing that we've seen that has worked well for customers of ours is to look on our events calendar to see where their partner channel, their channel partners are hosting events, because then you can ride on that event for free, right? So if
or not free.
but you know what I mean. Like if Optiv is doing something big and you're a sales rep, show up,
Yeah,
hang
get a
out,
ticket.
right? Get a ticket. Exactly. Right. And that way you can look at what's going on in your city, because so many reps don't actually know all the small cyber conferences that are happening 4 blocks away from them, 2 miles away, that they could go network at. Um,
It's true. It's like sometimes, sales teams, because of the pandemic, and we have one more question that we'll get to, because of the pandemic and because of how business was conducted for the last for 3 years, it was
yeah.
all virtual, it was all digital. They, kind of lost that little, oh, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to go meet people, right? And there are all
100%.
these local chapters that do have the right audience there, and you can just
The other
join
piece
ISSA, right?
the other piece to factor, though, Gianna, I think,
Yeah.
is, and I'm going to sound ageist, and I don't mean to, that the generation, I see you looked intently when I
Oh
said that.
yeah, I'm like preparing to make a face, and
No,
I'm trying to
is
be a
that
poker face here, but I don't have one actually. So go ahead.
is that the sales reps, where this is their first job,
Oh
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is their first job, and their first few years of experience were fully remote. It's important to think about how they're going to engage in an in-person event, because they didn't have the years of experience and coaching and somebody to be the wingman, be like, hey, have a drink and then have scotch and soda, or have a soda water, right? Like, and it's an interesting dynamic that I've seen sales reps have to learn, of like, no, don't have 7 drinks when you take a client out to dinner,
Whoa, Anthony.
right? Like, and
There's Oh, we're getting like laughing faces on the Zoom. I don't know if on the LinkedIn Live you guys can see. But yeah, I no, that's actually true though. People don't know that. You go from a frat house to a client dinner, and it's like, how are you supposed to know everything? Everything in business and in the work environment is taught. Like conference calls. How did you learn how to do a conference call? Right?
exactly, right?
Someone
And
told you, or
so,
you watched them do it.
and that is an important piece as we think about, doing more of these live events, because I would say over the past year, like at RSA, I've seen a few reps that I'm like, somebody needs to take them to their room, right? And
Whoa, yeah, definitely.
so it is an important piece. So I see
Okay.
the question here.
Yep.
Do you prefer to talk to sales, customer experience, or solutions architect at a live event? Let me answer this question this way. CISOs have some of the biggest egos ever.
Do you have a big ego, Anthony?
I used to. I
Okay.
legitimately did. Like like my wife would tell me, like, oh, like it was different when I worked for JP Morgan versus when I didn't, right? And the CISOs are also the most catered to executives out there. CIOs are not wined and dined as much as CISOs are.
Really? I think we should start that. We should start whining dining the CIOs. Go ahead.
You could, right? But if you think back to how this all started in early 2000s, a number of security leaders that were mid-level, like myself, we actually had to go give talks to build credibility. So we were out giving talks, we would go to dinners, we'd go back to the leadership team, be like, oh, I just met the CEO of so-and-so. And we did it to build credibility that cyber was important. And so as the industry has grown up, the executives have become very accustomed to, do I want lobster or steak tonight? I don't know. Let me pick a vendor, right? Like, and I made a post a while ago. I'm like, if you want to see if they're interested in your product, take them to Burger King, right? Or Wendy's, right? Because then you can have a real conversation as opposed to just some fancy caviar. So a lot of security executives like talking to founders. They like being introduced to founders. They like to be like, oh, I met the so-and-so executive over there, right? So I would say being able to talk to, having your salesperson introduce them to your executive leadership team. The customer experience, being able to talk to a peer, is also really, really good. If it's a solutions architect, they're likely going to delegate that conversation to somebody else on their team, right? Again, the preference I would say is get your executives, your leaders of your company, your founders, to meet the leadership team. Let them build the relationship and loop sales back in, right? We have a couple product programs where we do advocacy for customers. We'll help open doors, and we facilitate it that way. We make sure that the execs are connecting to execs, they build relationships, and that's what always turns into a deal.
Amazing. Anthony, this has been so educational. It's been
Awesome.
fun to look at the data of how CISOs move around and executives are moving around and how, oh, hey, like, what'd you say? It was Columbus, Ohio. Could be a great place to hold an event.
Columbus would be good. Phoenix is good too. And you don't hear a lot of people trying to do something in Phoenix. Phoenix is great in November. Right?
We were
Like,
looking at Phoenix for this year's conference. We chose Austin, but
yeah,
we
well,
took a look at Phoenix.
it's good. And again, if you guys want some numbers or you want to talk about something, just let us know. We're happy to tell you. If you're doing an event in the city, we'll tell you who they are. We'll save you a bunch of time. So and thanks for having me today. I really, really appreciate it. And let me know what other questions you have and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Anthony. And that's delverisk.com, right?
Yep, delverisk.com. Yep,
And
absolutely.
say you saw this on the Cybersecurity Marketing Society webinar /
100%.
live thing. All right,
Perfect.
folks. Bye. Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Susanna.
Cheers.
Bye,
Bye.
Anthony. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.